What is cross transference and why is it such a horrible thing to endure in terms of the psychotherapy process? Greetings, my name is Dan Sabo, and no, I am not a mental health professional. I am an ex-client of the industry, and I'm going to attempt today to describe a known phenomenon that I believe is yet to be labeled, but it can be a common occurrence. And I think the best way to start is, before I define cross-transference, I should describe transference and countertransference as it pertains to the psychotherapy trade. Now, every mental health professional that does psychotherapy well understand the concepts of transference and countertransference. And some clients do as well. But the idea of cross-transference, although it's been around since, I believe, the very beginnings of the psychotherapy profession, it has yet to be described for various reasons, which I'll get into in a moment. But first, let's describe transference and countertransference. So I thought the best way to do this is just to pull a definition from the American Psychological Association website. So the APA describes, in psychoanalysis, transference is a patient's displacement or projection onto the analyst of those unconscious feelings and wishes originally directed towards important individuals, such as parents. It is posited that this process brings repressed material to the surface where it can be re-experienced, studied, and worked through to discover the sources of a patient's current neurotic difficulties and to alleviate their harmful effects. Okay, so that's what transference is in a nutshell. The client projecting their issues towards the therapist, very, very much in a nutshell. Now, countertransference is kind of the opposite. Countertransference, according to the APA, is the therapist's unconscious and often conscious reactions to the patient to the patient's transference. Those thoughts and feelings are based on the therapist's own psychological needs and conflicts and may be unexpressed or revealed through conscious responses to patient behavior. In classical psychoanalysis, countertransference was viewed as a hindrance to the analyst's understanding of the patient, but to modern analysts and therapists, it may serve as a source of insight into the patient's effect on other people. So that, in a nutshell, is transference and countertransference. Now, over the years, many books have been written on these two subjects, and you can make lots of videos just on these two subjects alone. But the point I'm trying to make is the concept of cross-transference, and I'm going to put it as simply as I can. Cross-transference is the resulting, I guess you could say, negative outcome that the industry likes to use as a catchphrase, or what I would term as psychologically damaging. Cross-transference is a psychologically damaging result when a psychotherapist engages a client in the therapeutic technique of psychotherapy by proxy. Now, what's psychotherapy by proxy? Well, I clearly defined that in a companion video, and that video is titled Restrict Couples Counseling by Proxy, NASW Ethics of Third-Party Psychotherapy Communications. That's the title in which the concept of psychotherapy by proxy is defined. So cross-transference is the resulting horrible phenomenon that can result when, in a nutshell, a psychotherapist engages a client to send communications from the therapist to any third party, such as a spouse, a significant other, lover, close relative, something like that. So, in other words, it's a confidentiality violating therapy technique. Happens all the time, and the state of Michigan has told me that it's perfectly legal, but it should be banned, in my opinion. Now, why is this bad? Why is cross-transference a horrible thing? Well, I'll illustrate. It's all too common when people come to a therapist, they show up to a couples therapist or marital therapist or whatever, or even just for individual therapy, and they start talking about issues, familial issues or marital issues or issues between spouses or issues between two significant others. And the therapist tries to conduct couples counseling or marital counseling with only one client present. Now, not only is that unethical, the therapist, some therapists go much further, and they'll actually start judging or analyzing or giving psychological advice to a third party who has not even established what's called an informed consent agreement with that therapist, or a confidentiality agreement with that therapist, and that in effect violates that third party's privacy. Now, the reason why it's a horrible thing, I guess, to my mind, and I'm describing this on the fly, but I'm doing it because I've went through this over 20 years ago, and I've never gotten over it. Take transference, take countertransference, wrap that all up back and forth between the client, mash it together, and then take that client therapist dynamic and shove it off onto a third party that the therapist has never even met. And then you got this whole dynamic going. You've got back and forth frustration or anger or confusion going on, not only between therapist and client, but therapist and third party. And it creates this back and forth dynamic that causes the entire therapy relationship between the client and the therapist to go haywire. And it also causes the emotional health of third parties to go haywire too. So I'm trying to be as broad and as general as I can without citing too many examples, because there's a third video coming. It's going to be part of this triad, and that's going to be real world examples as to how psychotherapy and people's mental health can go haywire when psychotherapists violate the confidentiality of third parties. The reason why it's so concerning to me is that how can a psychotherapist make any kind of judgments or assessments or give any kind of advice to third parties about anything? How can they give that kind of advice with any kind of credence or validity when they've never met the person? It's crazy making. It's crazy making for profit. And in my opinion, psychotherapists do this out of sheer ignorance, and they either don't even care or how much damage that can do to third parties, or they do care, but it doesn't matter because they see that their only obligation is to paying clients. But as I said in the previous video I just mentioned, you don't know who or what's on the receiving end. And again, like I said in the previous video, you have to assume that everything discussed in that therapy session is going to end up with a third client or a third party. And you have no idea how that's going to affect that person. So I think it's important to define this phenomenon, to put a label on it so that people know what cross transference is, that it's real, that it can be potentially harmful, hurtful to third parties. And because of this, the concept or the therapeutic practice of psychotherapy by proxy should be banned, outlawed, in my opinion. And in the next video, I will illustrate why I believe it should be banned. And I'm going to mention that there is a third and last video coming up that I have the title for right here. And the title of the video that's to come, that kind of combines the video regarding psychotherapy by proxy and cross transference into a generalized real world example as to how horrible this can really screw up people. The title of that video is going to be Casual Sex, Non-Intimate Couples Counseling, Unethical, Hurtful, Legal, NASW and APA Complicit. Ban it? That's going to be the title of the video where I put these two concepts together. I think it's important to discuss these issues mainly because there is so much information on YouTube these days, mainly promotional material and advertisement as to how wonderful psychotherapy is for people. Well, according to the National Institute of Mental Health, depending on what studies you read, anywhere from 5 to 20% of people that take psychotherapy come out worse than they were when they started. And the entire trade of psychotherapy taken as a whole, it's a 50-50 crapshoot, because half the time you're not going to get any positive effects, or worse yet, you're going to get negative effects. Only about half the people, according to a lot of the studies that I've read, which I'll cite later, and I've already cited, only half the people that take psychotherapy end up seeing any positive results. So people need to be aware and careful, because you've got to protect yourself. And I believe that this concept of cross transference has never been even defined, because why would the profession define a phenomenon that is very harmful and hurtful to third parties and to clients while it's also profitable? Because if you can engage in crazy making for profit, that's more money in a therapist's pocketbook. So I think I'll leave it at that. And the two videos regarding psychotherapy by proxy and this one are the basis for what I'll be discussing in a soon-to-come video. And I'm going to demonstrate how psychotherapists generally can use this technique to cause a lot of distress in a lot of people. Thanks very much for looking in. Have a good day.